Hello, right, video 2. So this is just a short video about new habits that are important to establish to make these changes happen. So I just want to reflect on what we talked about on the last video, was the really taking it down to the most simplest thing, which is the big change that you want to make is eating 3 nutritious meals a day. That's where it all starts. That's really the sort of easiest thing that you can think of, your new mantra. All you have to do each day is do that, or as best as you can, or as closer to that as you can. And that can mean making some changes to what you eat, how you eat, what you buy. And the 3 nutritious meals is really just about having more protein, cutting back on the carbohydrates but not getting rid of it, so you're just shifting the ratios, and really just thinking about keeping as many, vegetables, nuts, seeds, oats, plant-based foods like that into your diet, because they're amazing for your gut health and your gut microbiome. Okay. Now, hopefully you've had a look at some of the recipes on the site, and I've also put together a few little meal plans that again might make it easy to follow. But for most people, that guidance of just changing the ratios of proteins to carbohydrates is really simple, and something that you can apply to the types of food that you eat at home with your family as well. Okay, but key thing is actually starting to think about planning to begin with. That's really essential. And one of the things that I just want you to think about or be aware of really is why it's so hard in some instances for us to eat the way we want to eat, because the type of way I'm sort of suggesting that you eat in this program is probably what you want to do anyway. But the problem is it's hard to stick with it. And the reason why it's hard to stick with it, and this is important because it's not about you not having the willpower or being disorganized or being lazy. It's simply because we've got really well sort of deeply ingrained habits that exist which inform the way we eat now. Okay. The other thing, that a lot of the food that we have, that we normally eat now, or the foods that we sort of are reaching for more and more, are quick, are easy to do, are already in the freezer, are at hand in a shop or a supermarket. And you can't underestimate the significance of that, because we are pressured, we're stressed, can't always think straight, we haven't got a lot of time. So it's completely reasonable and completely obvious, really, that we're going to reach for the most easy things that we have to hand when we need to eat. It just makes common sense to our brains. Fortunately, it's not always great for our bodies. But what's not going to change, really, in the short term is that your life's not necessarily going to get any easier. Okay, so you're still going to be busy, you're still going to be, having people sort of want you to do things and be all over the place with a hectic schedule. You only have so much decision-making capacity a day. So if you have a really stressful day and, your normal day probably is stressful enough, and you then get home, for example, to tea time, and you're starving and your brain feels like it's fried, you do not have the processing capacity or the decision-making capacity at that point to make a healthy or a different choice to what you normally have. Okay, you just can't think. So you have to realize that that's always going to happen. It happens to me, it happens to everyone. That's just how it is. And we're not going to change that. You're not going to suddenly get home full of beans and, having not had a stressful day and think, right, what shall I have to eat now? Yes, I'm going to make quinoa and I'm going to chop loads of vegetables up and it's all going to be amazing. It's not going to happen, right? So let's work with that. That's why you have to plan in advance. And that's a really important thing to begin with, because you need to make sure that when you get to that point of being, I've got to eat, what can I have? I'm starving, I've not had a minute to myself. You've got to have it planned in and ready to go. That's essential to start with, okay? Now, you can either think about planning a week in advance, and I encourage you to think about planning your breakfasts, planning your lunches, and planning your evening meals as well. And it might not be that you're even changing the meals that you're having, but you're making a decision about what you're having on each of those meals, on each of those days ahead of time. Yeah, and it's that ahead of time that's really important, because it means that when you get to that hungry point or that time of your day when it's meal time, you've made a decision already. It's super easy, right? So, some people find a week in advance too overwhelming. fine. Just chop it in half, do 2 a day, 2 or 3 days, 3 or 4 days, whatever you want. It really doesn't matter, even 1 day in advance. But you want to make sure that when you do spend some time planning in advance, then going for a shop, right? You have to plan your food so you know what you're having. Then you have to make sure that it's in your house and in your cupboards. Sounds really obvious, but you have to have everything in. And that's another mantra that I found that people have used, actually. Make sure I've got everything in, make sure I've got everything in. Because when you run out of the stuff that that you want to be eating, that you know makes you feel good, you have to then default to what's there. And that might be the sort of stuff that you don't want to be eating, crackers or crisps or kids' chocolate bars and stuff. So you have to make sure that the food that you need is there, okay? So one of the great things about planning, and I hope it works for you like this, is that when you have a plan of what everyone's having for their dinners mainly each day, everyone knows what's coming. So and I actually have mine pinned up in the kitchen. So no one ever has to say to me out of my family, what's for tea tonight? It's written down to you. So, and I know, and because I decide on a Saturday or a Sunday, I decide what we're having every day for our meal, and it's on the board. And what tends to happen between Tim and I is he'll look at that as much as I'll look at that. And if he's in first, he'll start making whatever that thing is for that night. And if I'm in first, I'll start making it. So it's a really nice way then of not having to be, having that mental load and having to micromanage everyone that you might want to help you during the week when you've probably already got enough on. So, it helps the family or your partner know what's coming, and it can also help get them involved with the preparation because they know what's coming, and you can maybe start to divide up the tasks with them as well. Try it. I hope it works. All right. You don't have to do everything. So that's how things work for me. It's not my favourite job. If you've sort of been on some of my groups, you'll know that I really don't enjoy doing it. But I will sit down and do it. It takes me half an hour now, and then I go shopping. So it really doesn't take an awful lot of time. But I am glad I've done it every single day because it means that my day is so much easier. I don't have to think. Okay. Now, I tend to try and make dinners for lunch, so I have leftovers, or I'll make something like a salad or a warm salad, or a soup or a vegetable-based dish with protein in that I might have 2 or 3 days on the run for lunch. Okay, so that's how I do lunches, so I'm not necessarily having to have something completely different every day for 21 meals. And breakfast, I tend to cycle through 2 or 3 things that really work for me, which is mainly fruit and yogurt and eggs on toast. So that's almost my breakfast decisions made in advance, my lunches decisions made in advance, and my dinner decisions made in advance for a week at a time. It's a real time saver, on busy weeks. Now, one of the things as well that when you start is planning the next day's meals. Now, this is really helpful when you start because you may well be in a habit of having toast for breakfast and then grabbing some sort of snack if you're hungry, or having a few biscuits with your tea, or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. And one of the things that we are trying to do is eliminate the need to snack. And when I say the need to snack, it's needing to snack because either you're hungry because you haven't had enough meals, or you're craving something, or you're a bit bored. There's a few things that we will cover in the future about why you snack, okay? But to begin with, you want to just try and feel that you're not short on your nutrition, so you don't need to snack from a hunger or a nutritional point of view, okay? So these 3 nutritious meals, I've said it enough times, I should be able to say it, shouldn't I? These 3 nutritious meals a day should mean that you don't actually need to eat from a hunger point of view. You're getting enough food in your day, so you don't need to snack. But you can still be in the habit of wanting to have a snack. Now, what I find really helpful to begin with when I start, or if I've had a holiday and broke my routine and trying to get back to my routine, is I don't just decide what I'm having the next day, I also decide what time I'm having it. All right, so I might say, well, I'll have my fruit and yogurt for my breakfast at 8:30, I'll have my lunch at 1, I'll have my dinner at 6, say, doesn't matter. And that gives me something in my mind to aim for. And that can be really helpful if you're trying to get this new regime going, but also break out of that habit snacking or that picking habit that you have. Because you'll be thinking, right, well, I need to have a decent breakfast. I need to make sure I can get to 1 o'clock. And you might start to feel hungry a little bit before, and that's not the end of the world, really, you know, because when you eat your lunch, you'll enjoy it. If you find that you can't get anywhere near 1 o'clock for your lunch and you're starving, then you've not eaten enough food for your breakfast, or you're not eating the right things for you. So you might need to go and check, have I made a big enough portion? Should I try a different meal and see if that works better? Okay. But having the times mapped out of what your meals are going to be and what times you're going to eat them can be really helpful, because it gives you something to aim for, okay? That you're going to be waiting from 8 o'clock till 1 o'clock before you have your next meal. And if you're really struggling, you know there might be a reason, and then you just make a bigger breakfast the next day. Okay, so that's something that's really helpful. Everyone's different about meal prep. Some people find that meal prep can be a real lifesaver when you're busy. And I'm just going to sort of leave that for something for you to think about, because everyone's different. You know, I tend to do minimal prep at the weekend. I might make sure that whatever I make on a Sunday, I've got enough for Monday, and then make something like a chili so that I've got something for Tuesday, possibly Wednesday, and maybe, you know, at very least a couple of lunches out of it. So I get out through the first couple of days of the week with a really clear plan, and then I might start to cook as I go along. Now and again, I'll do a little bit more batch cooking and make something that's a little bit of a bigger portion and put it in the freezer, so I've got something ready, you know, for next week. Like I said before, I do quite a lot of making the dinner for lunch, and just a little bit of time at the weekend, but I don't religiously prep at the weekend, because you do things, don't you? So it doesn't really matter. So you might find that, you know, find your own routine, but just have a think about how you're going to make your plans happen and what works for you. So it might be that you can carve up your jobs with your partner or your family. It might be that a little bit of weekend prep works for you, or you're basing your meals around things like, you know, chilies, curries, spaghetti bolognese, things like that are really easy to sort of double up and put some in the freezer so that you've got next week's ready ahead of time. Okay, so a few things, but just you take that time to have a think about what's going to work for you. And I think, you know, I tend to do this. You know, we talked about the fact that part of the main reason for doing this is to save yourself the brain power, or know that you won't have the mental capacity to make these decisions during the week when you're busy, you're distracted, you haven't got time, you can't think straight. So it's important to find time when you feel okay, and often that is during the weekend and maybe early on in the day before you've got sidelined or sidetracked into doing other things, that you can put aside an hour and just try and work things out for yourself, okay, and get that little plan together that you then can execute as you go along. All right, so find that works really well. You can always email me if you're struggling with that and you're not sure about, you know, you're struggling putting stuff together. But yeah, do a week, or if that feels too much, break it down, do 3 to 4 days, 2 days, 1 day, it doesn't matter. Just start thinking ahead at a time when you feel that you're not too stressed and you can think. Okay, hopefully that helps get you started. Those planning things, I mean, I talked about myself planning, I'm still planning, and I've been doing it for, maybe like 5 years now. So, and I don't like it anymore, but it's easier and it's quicker. And every night through the week, I'm really glad I've done it, because I just realise the value of doing it, because it just helps me be so much more organised in the week, and it makes your life a lot easier. Okay, that's it for this video, a nice short one. I'll see you again on the next one.